Hey everyone, and welcome to Seriously Risky Business, the podcast we do here at Risky Biz HQ every week, where we dive into all of the work that Tom Uren has done for us. He, of course, writes a newsletter of the same name that you can subscribe to by going to news.risky.biz. And Seriously Risky Business tends to focus on government policy, intelligence matters, and so on and so on. It's a big picture newsletter. If you're not subscribed already, I highly recommend that you do that. We would like to thank both the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation for supporting Tom's work with us, and also Lawfare and Lawfare Media for supporting us as well in this endeavor. And this week's edition of the podcast, the video, and the newsletter is brought to you by Tynes, who make an amazing automation platform. A lot of you out there would already know about Tynes, and yeah, it's great stuff. But Tom, we're going to get into the discussion now about what you've written about this week, and you actually have analyzed a story that I completely missed this week, which is, given that it's my job not to miss these things, is actually kind of unusual. But you've written about a leak from the Ministry of Justice in Israel that pertains to basically the Israeli government doing all sorts of stuff to isolate itself from the NSO Group lawsuit launched by Meta. Is that right?
Yeah. So I thought this story had a little bit of everything. So first of all, the hack from the Ministry of Justice is in response to the Israel-Hamas war. So this is one of the supposed hacktivist actions. And they stole quite a lot of information. They passed it to distributed denial of secrets, which is a sort of...
Yep.
I guess it's the spiritual ancestor of, spiritual descendant of WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
Except they actually seem to have ethics of some sort. And
they seem to do things like vetting and questioning things like, is this in the public interest and whatnot? Yeah.
That's right. And this ended up with The Guardian and Forbidden Secrets. So Forbidden Secrets is a journalistic advocacy non-profit that works to protect journalists, and they mined it for information relating to NSO Group. And so NSO Group was sued by WhatsApp way back in 2019, basically because it was targeting WhatsApp users. And so,
well, I think the interesting part was some of the network activity that NSO Group used to target those users, was really a violation of terms of service and whatever. But it was like, it wasn't just that the users were being targeted. It's that NSO Group was apparently using, Meta's infrastructure in a way that they really didn't appreciate and thought they had a strong legal case here to go after them on that. But sorry, I cut you off. Go on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that whole thing is interesting is because NSO Group was, at least at the time, trying to portray itself as a responsible actor. So you can't just totally ignore a US lawsuit and also claim we're a responsible actor. If you were a state actor, you would just ignore it. Like, lawsuits, pointless. But part of the process of a lawsuit is called discovery, where each side gets to ask for documents and information related to the case. And so WhatsApp, asked NSO Group, do you have any documents related to yada, 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 yada? Now, the problem is, from an Israeli government point of view, is that this could potentially be embarrassing. So we don't actually know what those documents might say, but the leak, there's a lot of documents that say that the Israeli government looked very worried about it and actually decided to preemptively seize those documents from NSO Group so that they couldn't be made available to the court case. And so the story is that they present NSO Group with a search order, they seize documents and computers. It also, that court order says that you can't transfer any documents or technical materials to any external person or entity without the go-ahead from Israeli authorities. So it's just a terrible look. And this occurred back in 2020, and it occurred to me that this is before the time it became very, very clear that the US government was not happy with NSO Group. So at that point in time, if you're an Israeli government official, you could say, okay, let's do the expedient thing. Let's make sure that anything embarrassing, and I mean, who knows what that was? There could be stuff that is pretty bad, or it could be like stuff that's nothing.
Well, but I mean, it sort of lends weight to this theory that has often been floated that the Israeli government kind of used NSO as a tool of diplomacy, right? Like, we will grant access to, certain states, based on, to curry favor with them and whatnot. So, I mean, it's long sort of been argued that to a degree, NSO has functioned a little bit like an extension of the state, even though it's a private company. And this kind of supports that idea, doesn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And so it seems like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like the more that they reveal, the worse it looks for them.
Yeah,
is my guess. And trying to use the powers of the state to really thwart the US legal system is just a terrible look. And I think I think times have changed since when this happened, though. And so now it really, to me, seems like the time to throw NSO Group totally under the bus and just say, well, actually, we made a mistake. Here you go, have all these documents. It'll be bad, but it's not as bad as continuing along this path. I think the problem with this for the Israeli government is that if you think there's a possibility for a spyware export industry, if you think it's possible to appear, air quotes, legitimate and responsible, you can't be seen to be in bed with the actual industry participants. You've got to appear to be above them and as a reasonable and actually hard regulator who makes sure that the bad stuff doesn't happen. And this totally undermines any possibility of the Israeli government appearing as a reasonable regulator.
I mean, I think this would have been more significant had it happened prior to October 7, 2023, right?
Yeah.
This is the thing that's complicated all of this, obviously, is that Israel's got much bigger fish to fry when it comes to managing its perception abroad, when it comes to its immediate, security situation and everything that's going on. So, I can't imagine that this is really going to have much of an impact on Israel. But, perhaps it will shape some perceptions among people in other countries who are responsible for regulating this sort of technology or trying to regulate it on a global scale.
Yeah, I think it basically tells everyone that it's impossible to have a spyware export industry that is responsible. I think people will use it as an example of, look, the Israelis tried it. They obviously got, I don't know, would you call it regulatory capture, or is it something more? I think it's something more than that.
It's the opposite of that, right? It was like state capture of a private enterprise. But I don't know that's fair, to be honest, Tom, because I personally know people who've been involved in that business who, operating out of, a Five Eyes country, and they've, they've exported to other Five Eyes countries and whatever, but they've definitely kept their exports quite limited. And, so I think the idea, it blows away the idea that you can, have loose export control on this stuff. But I don't think it blows away the idea that you can have some sort of export, like, some NATO member state has a company in it that starts selling to other NATO member states with the approval of their government. I mean, I think NSO is just such an anomaly because the controls were so loose and the government was approving exports to places it shouldn't have for, geostrategic reasons, right? Or economic reasons. So I think that's maybe the bigger lesson here, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think what I was thinking of when I was saying that is European lawmakers. So I think there's always a sort of dynamic, particularly in Europe, where everything related to spyware is bad. And so I think this will fuel that. I think that there's other countries that are, I don't know, would I say more realistic? Maybe more realistic, who try and actually manage it well, but that doesn't really overlap with the sort of European regulatory dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, so you wouldn't expect to see some burgeoning spyware maker open up in a European country and do the same sort of thing. I guess is what you're saying.
I think they'll get a lot of pushback. Is
100%.
what I would say, and I think this provides like a very reasonable sort of case study of how things go wrong.
Yeah, indeed. All right, let's get on to our next story now. And the other thing that you took a deep look at today is, possible election interference in the United States presidential election. What's interesting here, though, is that there's a report from the ODNI in the United States, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, that said that foreign adversaries are turning to commercial services to try to, push propaganda or misinformation or whatever. You're actually arguing in this piece, in your analysis, that this is good news.
Yeah. Good news. Good news,
Good
folks.
news, everyone.
And the reason is that elections, particularly in the US, are just awash with all sorts of influence and money. And, money buys advertising, it buys all sorts of ways to communicate to the public. And I think as soon as foreign actors get explicitly in that space, they're just in a world of hurt, because the amount of money that a foreign actor can afford to spend on the US election is just absolutely swamped by what domestic interests are spending. So some of the money, like it's
amazing. Like there's a paragraph you got here where it says that was it 5.7 billion was spent on the presidential race in 2020, with another 8.7 billion spent on the congressional races in the same year. So that brings you up to 14.4 billion, which is mind-boggling, right?
Yeah.
And now you've got the Biden and Trump campaigns have raised about 1.8 billion between them already, right?
That's right.
And we're still like 100 odd days out from the election. So and you make the point that the Russian troll farm, Evgeny Prigozhin's troll farm, the Internet Research Agency, had a budget of like 1.25 million per month.
Yeah,
right.
Yes.
Which, when you compare it to what American domestic interests are spending, it's a drop in the ocean.
That's right. If I had $1 million a month to promote me, I think that would be fantastic. If I had $1 million a month to swing the US election, I'd be like, I'll just take the million and go home and spend it on something else. That'd be more worthwhile. And so in a way, well, what I think is that US foreign adversaries have tried all sorts of different things, and it's not clear that they've had much impact. And I think this shifting to commercial services is a sort of admission on their part that, look, we're searching for ways to have impact. Let's just try and buy it. And so the ODNI report says that partly that could be because they're less bureaucratic, more agile, and that's probably true, right? But the thing is, they're now playing in a space where everyone plays. There's a whole swath of sophisticated influence actors that are legitimate, like legitimate influence, representing domestic political interests. And I think they'll just get swamped. So
that said, and you do point this out, and I think it's a point worth repeating. Things like hack and leak don't really cost anything and are massively disruptive, right? So
they can be massively disruptive. So I think that's where law enforcement, intelligence agencies, people trying to keep elections safe need to focus on those areas where legitimate influence can't go. And if there was something that swung the 2016 election, I think it was the hack and leak campaign. And I think people in the mainstream media are more savvy about the potential for those sorts of actions. And so I think, that doesn't mean it can't happen, but I think it may be not as easy. So that's the space to focus on.
Yeah. Now, look, one more thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap it up is a report from Reuters, which has established that the US Department of Defense has kind of half apologized to the Philippines for spreading vaccine misinformation. I think, when was that? Back in 2020 and 2021. This is a story that you and I spoke about previously where, the US, for some inexplicable reason, just had a brain fart and decided it would be a good idea to throw a bucket of you-know-what all over the Chinese vaccines, like the Sinovac vaccines and whatever, and sort of discourage people from getting them, which is, just absolutely insane. Now we have a Reuters report that suggests that, the US Department of Defense has admitted to the Philippines government that perhaps it could have done things a little bit better, which, I mean, God, you think?
Yeah, that's right. So I thought we spoke about this on the main show a few weeks ago, and I just thought it was a terrible story. To me, it seemed like it was motivated by just sticking one in the eye to the PRC, because the Chinese narrative had been that COVID actually came from a US Army medical research facility. And so I can understand how that would be, especially in the midst of the sort of the worst part of the COVID pandemic, that would be quite galling, and you want to do something about it. And so it appears the US Department of Defense did do something about it. It was just something so stupid. And I thought it was good news that they admitted that they'd done something wrong. So like what was in the Reuters report didn't actually say it was an apology.
Yeah.
But admitting you've done something
admitted
wrong
that it made, quote unquote, some missteps.
That's right, yeah.
And by the way, I got to just mention it for everybody. I'll throw up a graphic here for the YouTube version, but Tom's headline for this is the US DoD says, yes, we were vaccine pricks. Which, Tom, I'm so proud of you for that headline.
Thanks,
absolutely terrific. Now, everybody can go and read what Tom has written at news.risky.biz. Another terrific edition of the newsletter, my friend. Great to talk through it all with you, and I'll look forward to doing it again next week. Cheers.
Thanks, Patrick.